Okay, recording is on. So if I may ask you to, well, you actually stay where you are with your video. I'm going to share my screen, and then we will start off with, as I said, Robin first, Jean-Edouard second, and then Bill at the end. Too many things on my screen. All right, here we are. Okay, thank you for the attendees to this webinar, and thank you also to the panelists. Let me just explain how we are going to proceed with this webinar. I put on the recording for the webinar so we can access the recording afterwards. Welcome to this webinar, which is organized by the ACCESS.SPACE Alliance. This has been done for the past 10 weeks in a row. We thought that it was actually a good thing to do for companies in the new space, members of the ACCESS.SPACE Alliance, and also other companies who may wish to make a presentation on their company and the activities they're performing in a way to promote the industry, the new space industry, to other companies around the world. So we are here to support you in general. How do we proceed? So we're going to have about 10 to 15 minutes of presentation by each of the panelists with about 1 or 2 questions which the audience may ask to each panelist. So ask your questions on the Q&A button at the very bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A button. I may ask to some of you to speak up, so I will open up the microphone to some of you. And in addition to that, we'll have a 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes wrap-up session at the very end with some additional Q&As from the audience. I will also encourage the panelists also to ask questions and also to interact with each other as well during this session. So everyone is being muted. That way we can run along the session quite fast and quite in an appropriate way. In the ACCESS.SPACE Alliance, the team is basically myself, Betty, and Christian. Christian is based in Germany. Myself and Betty are based in the UK, in London. We formed the alliance basically about a year ago, March 2019. Its mission is to boost companies in the satellite sector and creating an environment that helps the companies thrive and prosper and grow. Between them, basically. Currently, we have 3 offices, one in the UK, one in France, and one in Germany. These are the companies that so far are members of the Alliance. Of course, we have, since the beginning of this webinar session, additional companies which have actually become members. So this chart has not been updated. We are moving towards a more formal structure. So this chart may change in the near future once the formal structure is put into place. The breakup of countries which are represented under the membership of this alliance, nearly about 1/3 in the UK, 1/3 across Europe, about 23% here, you can see on the screen in the United States, and about 10% the rest of the world. Today's webinar is the 10th in a row with Orbital Microsystems, Miratlas, and Skyrora. There'll be others in the near future. So next week will be ExoTrail, SpaceBit, Integrasys, and there will be an insurance panel on the 17th of June, and a Space in Africa panel on the 24th of June. I'm also organizing 2 additional ones early July as well. I will inform everybody what those will be soon. In terms of registration and participation, we had a peak of registration 2 weeks ago with about 205 people from around the world, from 62 different countries. This week we are about 110 from about 32 countries, 33 countries in fact. And I had an additional 2 people actually registering just before the webinar started as well. The type of companies and attendees are on this chart. There are different types of professions and different types of people attending today from all different levels, which is a great thing to have. In terms of our panelists today, we have Jean-Edouard, CDBO and co-founder of Miratlas. There he's waving his hand. Hi, Jean-Edouard. Then we have Bill Hosack, from CEO of Orbital Microsystems, a US company with also representations also here in the UK. Robin Hague, from head of launch Skyrora as well, who's going to talk to us about his company and projects. Just one last slide. If you are hiring or sponsoring students in whatever means you are doing this, let us know. We can help you publicize your requirements and opportunities here at ACCESS.SPACE. We have received in the past weeks opportunities from the sales space and also CTEL. Here are some of their requirements. If you have engineers or people that are in need to find work and so on, you just contact CTEL and other sales, or send me an email and I'll put you in contact with them. If you are also interested in sponsoring some of the webinars, or you're attending some of the webinars in the future, just contact me and we can organize something for you here. So let's start with I said Robin first. Everybody else, can you just shut down your video and your microphone? Robin, the floor is yours whenever you want to start. Question and answers from the from everyone. Please raise your questions at the bottom of your screen using the Q&A button at the very bottom. Thank you so much. The floor is yours, Robin.
Okay, marvelous. I think you just need to stop sharing and then I can swap mine on. There we go. Yes, so thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today about Skyrora. We're a new launch vehicle company. We're based in Edinburgh and we started in only summer 2017. So we're one of the newer of the small launch vehicle manufacturers that has demonstrable hardware progress. Our reason for being is to service the demand for small satellite launch. Someone particularly recently was asking me about the risk, the potential risk that they were concerned of to businesses like ourselves from Starship, or indeed from enhanced SpaceX rideshare. Our position would be that SpaceX and other affordable launches on a large scale are providing a heavy truck or a bus service, and what we can provide is a taxi. So we can provide a more targeted, flexible and responsive, dedicated, versatile, responsive launch service to small payloads. And particularly, it is currently forecast that there will be a gap in launch capability between the payloads that are planned to be launched, in the next few years, and the rockets that are available to send them up. So that's what we're looking to service. Now, there's a particular opportunity with Europe and with the UK. Within the UK, we're very strong in satellite manufacturing, and within Scotland, we're very strong within the UK for smaller payloads. And so it offers the prospect of being able to get an entire mission solution within one customs regime, which is quite useful. We're looking to launch satellites up to 315 kilometers, 315 kilos mass, up to 500 kilometers altitude, from the prospective UK spaceport. And this is the vehicle that we are looking to build. This is Skyrora XL, and we are taking quite a cautious manufacturing focused approach towards the vehicle, with as much modularity and similarity between the stages as possible. It won't be flying payloads quite like this one, although we could take LEGO into space if need be. Can you give me some space just now, because we're just presenting? So the first stage, there's commonality between first and second stages. The same propellants across all of it, across all the stages as well, for simplicity. We're pursuing an unusual direction with propulsion, one that the UK has particular heritage in, of hydrogen peroxide and kerosene. This gives us advantages in that both propellants are room temperature liquids. Peroxide itself has always been kind of on the edge of rocket propulsion. The peak so far has been the British Black Arrow launch vehicle from 1971, which is the only UK rocket to have put a payload into orbit. We're sadly the only country to develop the capability and then willfully cancelled it. But with peroxide, we believe it helps us overall with our logistics, because it's not cryogenic, because it actually functions as a monopropellant. We can light the engines and run the pumps in a very simple, reliable fashion. Paired with this relatively cautious design, we're exploiting the improvements, as I think all the small launch vehicles are, of additive manufacturing to dramatically streamline and simplify the construction of the engines. We're taking a step-by-step approach as our bespoke propulsion is being developed, and we have more on that in a moment, which is coming along very well. We are making a start building up launch experience, launch procedure, and the testing of subsystems using commercially available solid rocket propulsion to get things moving. So this is our sequence of vehicles. We have Skylark Nano, which has flown already twice. Our smallest, our lowest, and our slowest vehicle. It's higher, faster, and further from now on. We'll have some pictures coming up a bit shortly. Skylark Micro, which will also continue to be commercial solid rocket propulsion, which we hope to be flying in the next month or two, which will be the highest and fastest UK civilian vehicle flown in the UK, and has proven actually more of an administrative trailblazer than a technology trailblazer as originally envisaged. And Sky High, which is a hybrid powered vehicle that will get us to near space this year, and Skylark L, which is then our first actively guided rather than passively guided with fins suborbital launch vehicle using peroxide and kerosene, flight testing all our systems for Excel. So Nano is really quite a small vehicle, using commercial off-the-shelf construction materials as well as commercial off-the-shelf propulsion. But it reached 6 kilometers, so it's still a long way off space, but it's flown twice. And the usefulness of this approach is to treat even the small launch like it's the large one and build up team experience. Get people, because even on this scale, it's really quite impressive to see the launch, and it's quite a surprise to people that have not been to one before. It also was very useful for us in attracting public visibility to Skyrora. And for myself, coming from a rocket background, I was really amazed how much coverage it attracted. It within the UK, because there is not the history of or at least our history of rocketry has been cut off in the past. The level of public awareness is quite low, and a lot of people were really more impressed than I was internally by this vehicle. So that was great. And when it's not being used for launches and development, it actually sits in the window of our office on Princess Street. So if any of you are in Edinburgh, you'll be able to see it in our window near the doors. One of the challenges with tall, thin, minimum diameter test rockets, it's quite difficult to get them to fit into a PowerPoint slide. So these pictures aren't great, but this is Skylark Micro. We're pushing up to genuine sounding rocket territory of around 30 kilometers altitude. And we had actually expected to fly it last year, but it has in the end been the first rocket to go through the to found the new procedures in the UK for actual space launch. So this relatively small, simple rocket has been treated like a much more complicated, a much larger scale one, which, while it has pushed our schedule back, it means that we have been through this process already. And we believe this is a tremendously useful exercise for ourselves. Frustrating as it may be that we've not flown it, at least it means that we are ahead of everyone else in the paperwork. And that vehicle should now be flying in July. Which brings us to Sky-High. And now Sky-High is a hybrid rocket. It uses hydrogen peroxide oxidizer and 2 different hydrocarbon polymers, depending on the stage, to get different burn times. Now, we would not have created a hybrid ourselves because we have a bi-liquid program coming along and it would be a dead end for us. But this vehicle is a very well engineered and developed UK-based sounding rocket that runs on our oxidizer, on hydrogen peroxide, pressurized by helium, just as our vehicles will be. And it had been created earlier in the noughties for a near-space launch and was ultimately defeated by a combination of paperwork and sponsorship expiry. So it made an excellent sense for us to cooperate with Richard Brown, the engineer behind it, to not even reanimate it, just inspect it, ensure that it is not degraded in storage. And so this vehicle will be giving us a near space flight, as I say, approaching 80 kilometers, US Air Force Base, carrying out a demonstration of our flight termination system. In this case, we don't expect to need to destroy the vehicle, but we can operate the flight termination system repeatedly during the flight and record its results. And indeed, it does, of course, give us the opportunity to terminate thrust if it is not behaving in the way it should. But it's a simple fin-guided vehicle, so that should be okay. But it's our next stepping stone, so that we're not applying with micro, which is 4 meters tall, and immediately then jumping on to a bi-liquid vehicle. In parallel, we've been developing our bi-liquid engines. The first step last summer was the firing of our LEO upper stage engine, 350 kilos thrust. And I feel it's ironic that we've begun with the engine that we need last. This is the one that will push satellites on into space. But of course, it's the smallest engine. It's always going to be pressure fed, so it's the easiest place to begin to develop the additive manufacturing and improve the whole process, which it successfully did last summer at Spaceport Cornwall, which has led us through to the Skyforce engine, which comes in 2 versions. And our pressure-fed version, 3.5 tons of thrust, is now being successfully developed and qualified. This vehicle will fly Skyrora. This engine will propel Skyrora XL, our suborbital internal development vehicle. Although actually we are getting tremendous interest in people interested in commercial suborbital flight. So provided we can bring the same sort of cost and convenience advantages that we're looking to bring to orbital launch, to suborbital launch, we believe this may become a stream of revenue sooner than expected. So here we have, some of you may have seen in the press already, our completed Skyrora Skylark L vehicle. Our use of the name Skylark ties in nicely with Skyrora, but it's also in honour of the historic UK Skylark rocket program, which was a scientific suborbital sounding rocket launched over 440 times from 57 through to 2005. So we've chosen the designation, in this case L, as our vehicle is liquid versus the original historic Skylark, which was solid. And this vehicle is now complete. And I'll just swap over the sharing so that we can show you the video. Pardon me a moment. here we go. So this was our test just last month, accomplished with a very careful approach, I must say, towards social distancing and PPE to ensure that to keep all our staff safe. But here we have Skylark L, our complete suborbital vehicle, performing its complete integrated ground test. And for that matter, demonstrating quite how minimal our launch site can be, because the containers you see here are everything that we need on site to be able to launch the vehicle. Building us towards XL and the capability of being conveniently and responsibly able to launch satellites from the UK into polar and sun synchronous orbit, and particularly something that's key to a core part of our approach is that as a new launch program, as a blank sheet, we are endeavoring to create this route to space as environmentally sustainably as possible. We have no legacy cost. We have the opportunity to choose the best of historic programs, but to create a new system that has the minimum ecological footprint as possible. So we want to provide access to space that is sustainable as well as responsive. We're expecting to be able to fly so we're expecting to be able to fly micro this summer. We're expecting to be able to fly sky high late summer into the autumn. We'll probably be looking at flying Skylark L spring next year. And hardware is already in development for XL, so we're expecting to be able to fly XL 2022. So that is a brief overview, a quick overview of Skyrora, where we're from and what we're trying to do and our current status. But maybe heavier on the engineering side, because that's where I'm coming to it from. But are there any questions at this stage?
Thank you, Robin. We have, if you see, you can actually unshare the screen if you like.
Yep.
We have a question.
And apologies for the extra visitor as well.
That's okay, no problem. It's all right. Anonymous question asking, where will the launch of Skylark Micro be from in July?
In July, we have a range available to us in Scotland, which will be on land. That is as far as we can go and do things on land recovery. After that, everything else will be marine recovery from the coast.
And the next one will be, what is the XL payload capacity and what is the price per kilogram?
So it's 315 kilos into 500 kilometers sun synchronous. So obviously then we can do a little bit better into, we can do better with lower, and it is a graph, of course. So that's our reference payload and our reference orbit. We're looking to reach below $20,000 per kilo as we get up and running.
I'm going to keep the next two questions for later. One from Pierre and the other one, I don't know the name, FGL. I'm going to keep them for later. We're going to have now next Jean-Edouard presenting, and we'll have another 10-15 minute session on Q&A. Please don't delete your questions. I will ask those questions later after when everybody is presented. Thank you. Jean-Edouard, you can start whenever you fancy.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. Is the sound good? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, good.
All right, okay. Well, thank you very much, Tony. Let me share my screen. There we go. That should be the one. No, not quite the right one. That was this one. There we go. All right. So our Miratlas, thank you very much for the invitation first. I really enjoyed the seminar and the webinar up until now. It's really nice to be able to give one ourselves. I feel a bit humbled to go after Robin because he's actually doing rocket science, whereas we're firmly on the ground. So Miratlas provides a service of characterization of optical atmospheric conditions in support of new space application, the main one being free space optical communication, as well as space situational awareness. But essentially, our services are useful for anybody looking to automate operation of a robotic telescope. So the company was created just 2 years ago by Frédéric Jabet and myself. And things went quite quickly because by the time we incorporated the company, Frédéric had most of the technology already developed and tested. So we pretty much hit the ground running with almost ready product. And it was only a few months after that we had the first sale with the European Space Agency. So we were quite lucky that we could bootstrap everything and have a working product almost immediately. And we continue with this development and had a thermal camera system developed as well quite quickly after that, next spring. NASA followed up on ESA, and we had a first system sold at the Deep Space Station in Canberra, Australia. Defense customer as well, and we got a first commercial customer, not research customer, in December last year. And today we have about 10 systems already deployed. Would be more, but should be more, but COVID threw a spanner in the works. Now, I don't really need to tell you about new space. This is ACCESS.SPACE. You know all about this, but it never hurts to have a couple of pretty inspirational pictures. I apologize to Robin. It's SpaceX pictures. But essentially, it's because of new space that we're here. The lowering of the cost to orbit is enabling new telecommunication infrastructure. And we've seen that that radio frequency and bandwidth available is already becoming a bottleneck. If you want to save that radio frequency for the downlink for end users, then you need to turn to optics for the satellite interlink and for the uplink and downlink as well. So if many of you would know, but for those who don't, free space optical communication is basically replacing radio frequency by optical laser link, direct laser link, which has many advantages. Speed, regulation, security, it's point-to-point. It enables quantum key distribution as well to encode the transmission, as well as a reduced swap. And no matter how low the cost to orbit goes, it's always nice to have something which is smaller, lighter, and demands less power. Now you still have a problem. If the optical interlink between the satellites is great, because vacuum is great for light, it's not the same story with the atmospheric conditions. Obviously, cloud will completely block the transmission. Turbulence will scatter and diffuse the signal, and absorption will also reduce what light is available. So you need to monitor these parameters, cloud, turbulence, and absorption locally, continuously, and in real time. And what we notice is that there's no off-the-shelf solution for this. Weather station, satellite imaging, modeling don't provide you turbulence information. It's low spatial resolution. It's not in real time. And all of this is actually quite critical. So our solution was to integrate all the instruments necessary within a simple turnkey system, which will provide all these measurements. And we actually found out after we designed the instrument that there was a report from the CCSDS called Real-Time Weather and Atmospheric Characterization Data, which covered exactly all this. So it was a very good confirmation that our brainstorming and our evaluation of the market and needs was on point. There was one thing which was missing from the report. It was the daytime turbulence, which is something we actually covered. And we have a couple of pictures of our systems which are already installed on customer's site. Now, these are all the parameters we measure. Cloud, we have 2 all-sky cameras, one visible, one thermal. It's a lot easier to get the thermal, the cloud cover mapping with thermal camera, but it's a more expensive proposition. It also comes with some limitation regarding export regulations. Optical turbulence, we are using 2 types of instruments, very different instruments, very different physics of the measurement, very different physics of the atmosphere. And it basically offers almost 24-hour coverage. There's still a gap at dusk and dawn, as I'll go into detail later, but pretty much we can cover turbulence 24/7. Absorption as well, this is more simple. Sky temperature, water column measurements, and irradiance. We also have some more instruments coming up online regarding irradiance. And the standard meteorological quantities, wind, rain, the classic meteorological stuff. But the key is that you have all of this integrated into one system, which is easy to deploy, quite compact, about that size, so only a few kilos. So you can deploy this on site quite easily overnight if need be, and the weather is willing. And also there's no license required, because technically we're just looking at the sky. It's completely optically passive sensing. So you could literally throw one in your back garden, plug it into your network, and you're good to go. The night seeing monitor on the bottom left of the slide is actually a small telescope, which is pointing Polaris. We measure the motion of the star to record the low-level turbulence parameters. And the all-sky thermal camera is a lovely thermal calibrated camera, which is looking at a gold mirror. And this gives us 24/7 cloud cover mapping, and the weather station as well. Now in details, the visible all-sky camera is fairly simple. We use a very good CMOS sensor, which gives us magnitude 4/6 sensitivity, which for an all-sky camera is pretty damn good. Can go to very high frame rate, 60 frames per second as well, but we only use 1 frame per minute because that's pretty much all that's needed for our purposes right now. But we could go a lot faster for space situational awareness application, for example. The rear camera, 7.5 to 14 micron. At the moment, we use a 640 by 480 sensor, but we could upgrade to a 4 megapixel sensor. It is radiometrically calibrated, and as you can see, it gives you on the bottom right in close color image much clearer view of the clouds, and the temperature of the clouds that is related to the altitude and transparency. So that's something which is really useful, especially for telecommunication when you want to go night and day. We designed the thermal camera setup to be compatible with SWIR as well, from 800 to 1700 nanometers, which is great if you want to have a direct image at 1 micron and 1.5 microns, which will be the wavelength of choice for phase-based optical communication. So we kept that in mind, and our optical design is fully compatible with this. Now, the night seeing monitor works in the same principle as a DIM, which is a classic system which has been used by astronomers for years, except it uses a fixed position, and so it doesn't move and vibrate. We use a high sensitivity CMOS as well. Camera technology has gone a long way in the last 10 years, so we can use a very good CMOS camera. And the system is designed to keep Polaris in the field of view, so there's no adjustment needed. Once it's set up and pointed towards Polaris, there's nothing to be done. It just works. So that's the solution for the Northern Hemisphere. Of course, for the Southern Hemisphere and Equatorial region, we will still need to use a tracking system, and we have something in development right now. So this provides you with the seeing in arcsecond, the freed parameters, And also we have a development with a dual aperture system, which will provide you with the isoplanetic angle. And this was qualified way before the company was incorporated. We had a few, well, quite a few astronomy customers who were able to qualify and test the system. So this is already field proven. The sun-seeing monitor uses completely different principle. We use the solar scintillation measurement to get the measurements. Essentially, it means that it has a couple of limitations. We're only measuring the low level, like a couple of 100 meters from the ground turbulence. It's not sensitive to high altitude turbulence, which is not a problem because during the day, turbulence are mainly caused by convection, heating of the ground. And that's really the overwhelming contributor to turbulence for this application. So this system works quite well. It's also been field proven for quite a few years by solar astronomers. And it's also interesting because this is the most localized measurement. I mean, if you go 5 meters to the right, 5 meters to the left, or even better, 5 meters up, you will see quite different turbulence measurements. It's very, very sensitive to the ground layer and where you are. So ideally, you want to put that instrument as close as possible to where the aperture of the telescope is going to be. Even if the site, the POP or the data center is, and you know exactly within 10 meters where your ground station is going to be, a localized measurement is critical. Now this is the data we get, so you can see the night and day fits quite nicely. You still have a gap at dusk and dawn where there's too much light for the night seeing monitor to be able to detect Polaris, and there's not enough light from the sun to be able for the sun seeing monitor to work. So we still have a couple of hours gap at dusk and dawn. The exact width of the gap will depend on the latitude, of course, and on the season, but overall you can see that it matches up quite nicely. And this kind of nature's gift as well is that at dusk and dawn, that's where you don't see a lot of the convection phenomenon dies out. So you always have this quiet time of the day at dusk and dawn where the atmosphere is actually very quiet, and we actually can't measure that, unfortunately. Physics, what can you do? But if you look overall over a 2 weeks period, this gap becomes pretty much irrelevant, and you can really see the fluctuation here. There's kind of a peak there at dusk and dawn, and the transition is not quite right. But you can see if you ignore the first peak, it's very, very good. And all of this we make available as a service as well. So the data from the instruments are simply pushed to an online database, which is available through a simple dashboard. You can actually check it out. We have a demonstration dashboard online right now. And we also make this data available as a service using our own instruments. Customers have the choice to buy an instrument for themselves. That's usually the preferred solution for a researcher and university and people like that. They buy the instrument, and they can also plug it into their own existing instruments. Whereas the industrial customer prefer to use the subscription model as a data as a service, and we take care of everything, the installation, the support, and they just log in and get the data. So that's pretty much it. We want to offer some quantitative and qualitative atmospheric characterization to really make the site survey of the optical ground segment, so we can optimize the location, the numbers of ground sites. It also, knowing the turbulence and cloud cover also informs the optical design of the terminal, so you can decide if you want to put a 60 centimeter telescope, a 40 centimeter telescope. Are you going to use adaptive optics? How to dimension the adaptive optics loop? So it's all design relevant to the design. And then once the optical ground station is on site, it really optimizes the telescope operation if you have a partial cloud cover, you can say this satellite is going to be available, this one isn't, so you know where to point, and it also optimizes the handover between one ground station and the next. And finally, there's quite a lot of CPU power available on the ISM. So the long-term idea is to be able to provide some machine learning and forecasting of the condition in the next couple of hours, so you can anticipate how to do your maneuvers. And that's pretty much it. I'm done.
Thank you, Jean-Edouard. Thank you for the interesting presentation. I don't have any questions from the floor. Please ask your questions now as I'm asking mine. Jean-Edouard, have you done any space diversity type analysis? I mean, if you place 2 or 3 different equipment at different sites, for example, either there are, you know, you want to look at some correlation of some of the parameters of the visibility side. If I have, for example, satellites in space which may have laser communication down to Earth, and they may like to do, you know, diversity schemes. Have you done any correlation analysis to see how, if you put your equipment in 2 or 3 different sites on the ground, how they would uncorrelate in a way, or correlate?
Yeah, there are some really good studies on that, theoretical studies coming from Earth observation satellites, mostly in the cloud cover. It's there's not a lot of information on turbulence, but regarding cloud cover, for example, it's been computed by other people that you need about 10 stations to cover Europe to have some decorrelation, but that's solely for the cloud cover. Now the turbulence is a different thing, and we actually have some measurement between the Observatoire de Haute-Provence and Gréoux, where our company is based, which are about 40 kilometers distance in a straight line, and you can actually see as a front is moving that the turbulence will, the conditions will degrade first in the observatory, and then in our site in Gréoux. So you can actually see the time correlation between when the bad weather is going to move in. And we expect to be doing the same thing in Tenerife, where we have our system with ESA, and we are going to deploy a system in La Palma, which is also 40 kilometers away. And that would be very interesting to see the difference between these 2 sites as well.
Okay, so you still, you say anything less than 40 kilometers not good in a way, or you require greater distances than that to have the correlation?
This is on the nighttime turbulence. I should insist that on the daytime turbulence, it's extremely localized. I mean, if your telescope is sitting on concrete or grass or water, if it's sitting on a tower, which is a couple of meters high, which means you can avoid the ground layer turbulence, it makes a huge difference. So I would say for the cloud, it's country to country. For turbulence, nighttime turbulence, 50 kilometers make a big difference, and for the daytime, 5 meters make a big difference. So okay, you really need to take everything into account, and that's what we try to help.
I'm thinking of islands like Santa Lina, which is just basically in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and it's only about 16 kilometers long and maybe about 5 kilometers wide. You know, putting something 40 kilometers away is just in the middle of the sea, in fact. I have a question here from an anonymous person for you. Who are the customers and what is your revenue model?
Customers are, the first adopters were researchers like ESA, universities, and people like that, ESA and NASA. Our first commercial customer is KSAT, who is actually building a ground station in Greece. They've announced that, and they're using our instrument as a site survey and to inform the design and later to drive the optical ground station. And the revenue model is first the sale of instruments, quite simply, but then we also offer data as a service, so as a subscription to the data itself. As we deploy our own instruments, or if customer want to pay an installation fee and get a minimum subscription time, then we're happy to offer this as a service as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move on with Bill now, and then we'll have more questions later. Bill, up to you now. Over to you. You need to unshare your screen, Jean-Edouard.
Yeah.
Okay. Over to you, Bill.
All right. Okay. We'll share this. All right. Can I get verification? You can see the screen?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to talk very, very shortly about OMS. I was actually asked to talk a little bit more about the downstream monetization aspects. So I'll just take just a quick second to talk about OMS. So Orbital Microsystems has two unique capabilities that come together. One of them was we have deep experience in building sensors for space deployment. We also have a tremendous amount of experience in the data aggregation and preparation world. So what we saw is that there actually was a need to improve both sides of the equation, both the amount of data, the quality of data, but also the method and tools with which people gain access to data. So to do that, we have kind of a two-prong attack. With our GEMS fleet, we currently have our first satellite up on orbit. That's the IOD-1 mission. Our ultimate goal is with our commercial, is to be flying a multi-channel microradiometer, which will be in the spring of next year. We'll be able to deliver cross-track scanning in microwave frequencies of 181 and 183. Of a swath of about 1,200 kilometers and a target resolution of 15 kilometers square. The ultimate fleet will allow us to reach down into about the 15-minute refresh rate. That way we're able to actually monitor from space temperature, humidity, and precipitation categorizations for anywhere on the planet every 15 minutes. The second part of what OMS does is with our ICE platform. And this is bringing in our deep experience in large data, especially with the fact that much of our team has had to deal with the current systems that exist and the challenges that you have of bringing in multiple data sets, both from the public and private sectors, and making them available. So we will be providing the ICE platform. This will allow companies to either partner with us or directly gain access to the data in order to give solutions to the target markets. And I will talk a little bit about those target markets as part of my drive for talking about monetization. Do like to just kind of show off a little bit here. This is our surface channel observation from the Aphid typhoon that just went by. India, pretty devastating storm. It took us, because we are utilizing only one ground station, took us about 30 minutes before we could actually downlink this image. But once the image hit the ground, we were able to prepare it and turn it around and make the data available within about a little over 3 minutes. So it's just all about speed. We see that the industry is definitely looking for temporality as well as global coverage. All that said, it's a balancing act when it comes to monetizing all of these. It's very interesting that the last question was, who are your customers, to the previous presenter. But it ultimately comes down to the balancing act between what it is that we want to do as companies, what it is the company wants to do, and then what can actually really be done, like the realities of the world. And right in the middle there, that's where the monetization really happens. As much as we all would love to, deep dive and just, get in there, make new instruments, new rockets, new satellites, all of that. At the end of the day, it's all about a sustainable market, which is really where it happens, and that's all downstream from much of the systems. To highlight the challenges when you're looking at downstream monetization, first thing you need to look at is that customer base, and that customer base is so wide and so varied. You have different levels of sophistication, you have different output needs, and that really causes a challenge for a single entity to be able to meet that. And just to highlight that, in agriculture, it's all about keeping farmers on the land and keeping them so they're sustainable. Challenges are we're monitoring water. You have crop traders, you have the business markets, the insurance markets, and the farmers themselves. Multiple views, multiple needs, all related to one topic. Transportation. So I pick aviation as one. Again, you have a different look and need from the operations guys, as you do from the marketing guys, as you do from the pilots. Airspace management, in many ways it looks the same, but there's actually a lot of different kinds of solutions that they're looking for. Risk and insurance, same type of situation here. This isn't just a matter of, oh, let's make a new index. Insurance companies are out there looking to move their services closer to the nowcast, and really be there to support their clients, as opposed to only being there when everything hits the fan and the phone calls coming in and people are screaming and yelling. They want to be able to engage in the whole life cycle of risk. And then we have government and military. We have the challenges of budgets. We have the challenges of different services needing different areas of AOIs, different needs, different temporalities. All of these things are what we need to look at when we're talking about monetization. So it's a multitude of needs. The goal is to find those common links and then leverage those in order to grow throughout the horizontal and vertical needs of the companies. I use as an example for us with microwave radiometry, essentially getting 3D images of weather. Across the market, the goals were we needed to be more operational, we need more data, and we need low latencies. And this is what every company needs to look at when it comes to monetizing. What are the things that we do best, and focus on those and make that happen? Because if you try to be everything to everybody, you're going to be nothing to nobody. Hopefully this will start a conversation about what are the different kinds of business models that enable these kinds of monetizations and help to answer those questions. Downstream is the real market opportunity. I come out of the aviation hardware world. I love airplanes. I love things with fire that shoot out the back. I love all that stuff. But when you look at the scalability and the size of markets, as in aviation, I also see similarities in space. The further away, or let me say it this way, the closer you get to the actual rocket, the smaller your profit margins. Same in the aviation industry. You have the folks that sell the airframes, that margin is less than the guys that integrate everything into the airframe, and their margins are smaller than the guys that supply the subsystems, and the subsystems guys have less margin than the parts manufacturers. And then you have the service side. So though the checks are large, the overall profit margin and scalability of those businesses are very, very small. I like the way Euroconsult shows the Earth observation value access stream. That you're going to have a couple really big checks that are written by governments, but then you can have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of checks written by other users that can ultimately dwarf what those larger checks look like, especially when you're looking at resale value in scalability. Just to highlight why, again, the downstream point is really the place for scalability and sustainability in our industry. Is imagine how many companies exist in just these segments that are on the outside: agriculture, energy, forestry, food security, insurance. Yeah, I mean, there are thousands and thousands of companies. And for a launch provider, there are dozens of potentials out there. So it's there's money to be made throughout the whole life cycle, but at the end of the day, if the guys you're launching aren't making the right business models and the right business decisions, they're not going to have the dough to pay for their launch bills. And it really is an ecosystem that ultimately creates this monetization path that we're going to look at. So monetization is all about when do we get paid by the clients and how do we get paid. I'm just going to, again, I don't profess to be the ultimate guru on business models. I have started multiple businesses in different structures. Some have done good, others have made huge flaming craters in the ground. I'm just talking from my point of view and my experiences. I'm excited to actually hear other people's inputs in this, because this is an ecosystem. I do not see it as a go alone type of market. So you're going to have a multitude of client needs, expectations, requirements. At the same time, you have these large differences in the types of data that are out there, where they come from, who they come from. And nobody is the single point solution in the downstream data game. We all got to work together somehow, some way. Now, when you look at how you get paid, you sell directly to the customer. Go right out to the Munich Re, go out to the the Delta airline of the world, and try to get them to buy your data direct. You can also work with partners and do shared revenue type of models. You can be totally in the background and let the industry, let those shared revenue partners really be the wholesale channel with the store in the store or white labeling your data. And then there's the other path, which is supporting academia, research, to kind of get them hooked on your candy. And then when they go out there and start their businesses, they kind of drag you along. These are kind of the standard ways right now that we look at the market. And I see the path is very common out there in the way that data providers are going to market. And usually they have a government client because they have the highest risk profile. They know they're going to be working with new stuff. They're also looking for that cutting edge next step, and they know that they're going to have to work through the process. So you start with those government partners to help in the development, early buys. They turn into a buyer, which can then make it easier to have like a partner product development conversation with others that are supplying services into that big government buyer. Once that starts to hum, now you're able to go and target the really sophisticated part of the market. And that's where we're able to approach large corporations that have deep pockets, they have very specific needs, and they, they're all looking for that competitive advantage. Then the next level of truly scaling up your business then is taking and finding that breakthrough product that you are the best at. Everybody's going to come to you. When I mean everybody, I mean everybody. It's as many people across the verticals and at multiple levels in the horizontal are going to be coming to you. And then ultimately that breakthrough service. I think we're still waiting for that in EO. And people will argue this with me, that there have been some successful companies and businesses out there. Yes, there's been not people out there making good money. I can also make the defense, though, that generally it's because they're able to generate a solid advertising revenue piece, and we are still waiting for that exit in space. So until that exit happens, it's really hard to say we validated the monetization model. And that is one of the big things that the investment world is really looking for, and now a lot of the corporate partners out there are also looking for. So we're going to have to band together and work this out. So what model is best? No one model is perfect for everybody. Different providers, different products, they're all going to have different. I kind of see them broken up into these four main groups, at least in our industry. You have the direct data sales. And I'm focusing on data. That's really where the key downstream value is generated that enables all the fun stuff that we get to do upstream. Direct data sale, it is the simplest business structure. It does require a lot of relationship management, though. It keeps it all for yourself and your stakeholders, keeps it in-house, so you keep the profits to yourself. You have high IP control, and your data. If it's with data, you get that resale. It's scalable, but you are generally limited to very sophisticated users that can just take data. So that's a small market out there. Now you can resell to them multiple times. That's like weather data. Weather data expires. It's great. So the real downside on direct sales is you really do need to have very sophisticated partners that are willing to take the time to move through the development phase with you. And if you get too commoditized, then you can get risky in becoming the me too. With optical observations, there are now a lot of people out there. So it's hard to keep that advantage on just the direct data sales. The next is an analytics as a service. This opens up a little bit more cross-segment. It still keeps everything in-house for your stakeholders, gives you that control over IP. The scalability early on can be challenging because now that you're building specific analytics for specific people, it's all about your labor force. How many people are you willing to hire to take on new products, new expertise, and grow that piece of it? You also do lose a little bit of IP control because when you are working with some of these clients and you need to get together, you might have to share some of that IP. And again, there's a risk to becoming a me too. I'm not going to say, don't take this the wrong way, a flood model is a flood model is a flood model. There are very unique and amazing things that everybody does. But at the end of the day, out in the market, they see flood model, they see flood model, they see flood model, and everybody's just saying ours is better. So there can be some challenges there. The next is platform as a service. This is looking at like how QuickBooks has monetized, or Facebook, outside of their advertising. It's you provide a marketplace. And that's a place where the analytics guys can come and they can work together with the direct sales guys and create a platform that then pulls in customers. Again, this is an open cross market. It allows scalability through your revenue sharing partners. High resale of the core services. You're just selling, that background just keeps cranking and pumping. And it allows you to strategically partner with multiple partners all in the same segment. Scalability early on, though, can also be a challenge. Again, it can be a complex market. Without good definition and understanding of what makes your platform easier or smarter to use, you can run into some of those risks of the B2. You also take on a lot of responsibility as a platform operator for those revenue share partners, because it's all about uptime. If the platform crashes, you have a lot of really angry people, customers and partners. And then you have the marketing group. This is like the Star Alliance guys.
1 more minute.
Okay, and I've got one slide. So this opens you up again to that cross market, highly scalable, utilizing revenue share partners. You generate a dynamo of business with the user generated products, and you maximize the economy of functional groups. So you can have a team that focuses on selling for the whole marketing group. The cons, it's very complex. IP control management can be a challenge, responsible for uptime, and you have to share a bit of the profit. At the end of the day, it really comes down to what is it that is going to allow you to leverage what you do best with your partners. Is it visualization? Is it data versus analytics? The best business model, I cannot say there is a best business model yet. It hasn't been proven. There hasn't been an exit. But I hope that this kind of generates some way of thinking. And if there is one thing, though, to take away that I will say is it's really, really hard to go it alone with a single data source and a single platform. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Maybe just unshare the screen that people can see you. Yep. So I got a couple of questions for you here from the audience. The first one is the last one on the list. Have you developed an in-house solution for managing and controlling your satellite fleet operations?
So because our expertise is instruments and data, we are looking, we've gone to the market for that. So right now, we're utilizing and partnering with Space Applications Catapult in the operations. We do see several solutions out there for fleet management. I think at the end of the day, for us, it's about that fidelity of pointing and being able to communicate rapidly between us and our operation partner. So that we're getting the best bang for our buck.
And there's another anonymous question, and then we're going to go to the general session after this one. What are the main differences between your tech and business model versus the GPS RO systems like Spire and Planet IQ?
So we're a cross-track scanning data capture platform. So imagine it like mowing the lawn. So we have specific pixel measurement and categorization capabilities. The difference between us and GPS RO, it gives amazing vertical resolutions. The horizontal spatial resolution, though, is very large, and when you're looking at trying to do pinpoint measurements that are repeatable, you really are at the whim of where is that pressure gradient fall in that observation line, and having two systems in the right place at the right time in order to do that. So we do see value in the repeatable cross-track scan, and we actually find great use as value to our observation of working with GPS RO. But as we've seen out on the market, selling the forecast is much easier than selling the direct data. And we think that with microwave, which is just a better direct path for utilizing that data set.
Okay, thank you so much for that. We have now opened up the Q&A session for everyone. Can I have all the panelists on the screen? In the meantime, if there are questions to be asked, use the Q&A window on the bottom of your screen for all the other attendees. So let's start on the questions I have at hand. Pierre Lyonnais is asking, you can actually, to the panelists, you can actually read the question as well on the screen. What is your market? This was aimed at Skyrora. What is your market projection? What is your target price at launch in kilogram per in Leo? And how many people are currently on the company roll?
Certainly, yes. So we're looking to have accomplished, double check, indeed, my notes. We're looking to have accomplished 6 launches by around 2024, rising to around 15 launches in the late 2020s. We're expecting to begin at around $30,000 per kilo, but our target is to get below $20,000 per kilo. Oh, yes, and we're around 100 people.
Okay, let's see. Sorry, I was doing something else. I was trying to take a photo shoot of all 4 of us on the screen, and I was trying to save it. Next, the question is coming from, well, I have a few questions myself. I don't see, I have one more on the screen for Skyrora, but let me go to Bill first. There was a question on, do you own your own satellites and constellation, Bill? You said you takes 30 minutes to, or 15 minutes actually to repass and take the same measurements at the same place on the Earth. Does that mean that you have a constellation of satellites of your own, or do you actually also borrow other satellites or lease capacity from other satellites in that respect?
Right. So for microwave, we are the only commercial company in the world that flies microwave radiometers. And we're the only ones flying miniaturized in a commercial way as well. So with the current flight, when I was talking about that delay, that's the latency from the observation to downlink, because we currently are not fully leveraged with the ground network. We do own our own satellites. Our first commercial platform is a 6U satellite. We're able to build and launch that at a fraction of the cost of what a government platform is. And that is why we're also going to be able to fly multiples. We will be building, truly building up the constellation starting in the spring of next year. We've got builds going on right now with Clyde Space and with GOM Space. I'm an aviation guy. There's no such thing as a single source supply chain. So it's important that, and actually, I think it works out great for all parties involved that we have multiple suppliers. But we'll be looking to be kicking off that build in the spring. But we do own our own satellites.
Yeah, I remember actually last year you were launching. Was it your first in July last year when you came to?
Yeah, that was the IOD-1 in partnership with Innovate UK and Space Applications Catapult.
Okay, thank you. Jean-Edouard, you said earlier that your business model, you're actually selling your own equipment in addition to actually providing data. So if that's the case, is there a particular price that you can tell us about, a little bit more about your sales of the equipment and also the data? I mean, is there a particular cost model or price model that you have that you can share with us? And also, when you deploy the equipment in areas where there is no electricity, how would that function?
The easiest one is the electricity one. The case hasn't presented itself yet, and we don't expect it to. Initially, we thought there would be such requests, but it turns out that you want to put your optical ground station close to infrastructure, which means you have broadband, ideally fiber, POP, data centers, and the such. So frankly, if you don't have electricity, it's unlikely you want to put a ground station there. So it's usually in places where you already have an infrastructure. So the question hasn't arisen yet. Only astronomers want to really specify for specific application the best possible place for availability and turbines. Price-wise, the basic starting price for a system is about $35,000, something like that. And data as a service, we start at about $1,000 a month. That's it. That's it. So the difference is really OPEX versus CAPEX. And as I said, our industrial customers prefer usually the OPEX, and we take care of everything else.
Okay, thank you. More questions coming. Okay, one by one. I don't know, there's a person called F and then GL. I'm not sure the name and who he is, but let me read out the question for Skyrora. So maybe there's a couple of questions which are linked to each other. When do you want to launch your orbital rocket, Skyrora XL? And hopefully, how, next question would be, how realistic is the 2022 orbital launch target?
So 2022 is when we hope to. Of course, it's always the if everything goes right date. So it may slide, of course, but at the moment things are coming together very well, and we're quite confident of being in that time frame.
Okay, 2022 Skyrora XL. There's another question from previous request was, when you say 20 kilograms, 20K per kilo, is this orbital?
Yes.
Okay. More questions now for Bill. Bill, is your data, first of all, you talk about microwave. We're not talking about 2.4 gigahertz, you know, the microwave frequencies at 2.4. You're talking about which frequency bands, allocations, and what are the issues or problems you have there, for example. I mean, these are exceptionally high frequencies. I think you are talking about. Give us a little bit more information on the type of medium that you are and frequencies that you are using.
Absolutely. So the way microwave functions is there are particular frequencies that allow us transparency levels through the atmosphere. So there are certain frequencies that are completely transparent to water, but not oxygen by itself, and vice versa. So with our dual radiometer, we're focusing on the two primary bands that are utilized by all the national weather services currently. They've been well vetted, well tested. That's 181 gigahertz range, and then 183 gigahertz range. So we are above where most of the communication work is. Now, there are other frequencies that we would be looking at that are currently also being flown on the large, exquisite satellites that are built by NOAA and ESA. And when you look at like the 50-56 range, this is where we start to see some of these G5 or these 5G interactions starting to come into play, and we get down. One of the biggest gaps that's out there is soil moisture. You can do soil moisture with active microwave. The SPACE mission was like that, but it requires getting down into those single-digit gigahertz ranges, or actually moving up higher. When you get down low, you really start, there is a big risk of up and coming ground systems basically blinding current satellites on orbit. So because of the size factor that we're working on, and these other transmission risks, that's why we are staying higher in the frequencies. And we will actually be looking to utilize observation windows that are higher. But at the end of the day, it's measuring temperatures of oxygen and water, and then utilizing also various weighted functions and deep math stuff that Al Gashevsky, our chief scientist, is an innovator on being able to identify hydrometric values, precip categorizations, and these kinds of things.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you have any export control restrictions, for example, on your data, Bill?
Not as of yet, but 5 years ago, I would have also said, why is everybody worried about, the data feed? It's not going to get turned off. Well, guess what? NOAA has turned off the data feed a couple times during extreme storms. There's also been a kind of a systematic pull down of data that's very valuable to climate analysis and views as well. So no, there is no ITAR control on microwave weather. We are passive. You do move into a different conversation when you're talking about active, when you're actively transmitting microwave signal, and then looking at that reflection. That's when you do move into a little bit of ITAR issues, especially on the hardware side. But as it stands right now, weather data is an open, uncontrolled product, and I think that the WM40 agreement really has has put some very important and powerful protections in that, so that it does not become a topic at all.
Okay, excellent. I have lots of questions for Robin. Robin, I guess you can see the screen on the Q&A. Any of you can see it. You want to pick a questions from all those that you have there on the screen that you, or maybe a group of questions that you feel answering?
Hi, Adam.
Read out the question as well.
So the question being, do we think the vehicle or the sounding rockets will be ready before UK launch sites are licensed for launch to space? It is a current risk. The sounding rockets are obviously, we can conveniently keep that below international space, which may make things easier. We of course we are willing to consider other locations should that be what we need to do if we're ready and they're not. But our default obviously is that we would like to be able to launch from Scotland. Which leads us on perhaps to the other one, which is will we fly from the proposed Sutherland spaceport or another site in Scotland, where there are three likely contenders at the moment. There's the Sutherland spaceport on the mainland in the middle. There's Spaceport 1 on North Uist in the Hebrides, and Spaceport Shetland on Unst at the top of Shetlands. And all three locations have their own strengths and weaknesses. We are friends with all three, and we're happy to work with all of them, and we'll see who prevails, or indeed if they all do.
I have a question for you, Robin. What features are you thinking in putting together as a process to remove or to reduce any orbital debris once your rockets start going outside of the atmosphere?
Yes, so only the third, so we're a three-stage vehicle, which gives us a bit more flexibility than 2 stages. And the third stage is the only one that will achieve the speed to potentially stay there, and we will specifically take measures to bring it down again, as SpaceX does with their second stage.
So it's some kind of active way of removing any debris from your third stage, or second stage, third stage that might go in the atmosphere.
Yes. So our our third stage is the part of our hardware which could directly contribute to it. So we will actively bring it down again. And overall, our design approach is it's a critical issue now. And of course, as we want to be environmentally sustainable in the biosphere, we also want to be sustainable in space as well. And minimizing the risk of foreign object release is always something that we're considering in our design.
Okay, I'm running a poll in parallel to the questions. So if you can please answer the poll to everyone. Jean-Edouard, on your side, this COVID-19 and all the other, and also the other panelists can answer. On your side, this COVID-19 lockdown and staying at home and so forth, how is it affecting your business? I mean, you must have people and equipment that has to go out and be deployed. Is that is the current situation affecting your business?
Yes, it does, but I'm not sure if it's going to be for the better or for the worse. Initially, for the first 2 weeks of confinement, everything stopped and it was kind of panic on board. But one of our customers actually told us that they've called our product internally their COVID project, because it's actually something which is relatively simple and cheap to do, and it has pushed the priorities for them. When everything else was a bit more complicated and took a step back and took a little bit longer to manufacture and deploy, that was something which was simple for them to do. And also it turned their mind towards the ground segment and preparing the ground segment until the constellations are ready to be launched. Yeah, so that's yeah. It has been, I have to say, for us quite positive, and also the fact that it allowed us to do some groundwork on the instrument, on the software, on the marketing side, which we have been postponing for some time. So overall, I have to say, it's been quite positive.
Good. All right. Are you, I mean, both for Bill and yourself, you are measuring the sky and you're measuring atmospheric parameters. Have you done any analysis in during this current period of time where there's been less airplanes flying? Weather conditions have been so amazing. Even here in the UK, it's like being in Spain or in Sicily, for example, with the weather that we have. Have you seen any particular changes or any particular things that in the atmosphere, for example, in terms of reduced pollution and so forth, that is affecting or not affecting anymore, the climate change or climate conditions?
So I'll jump in first, because with our on-orbit observations, we really are not sensitive to aerosols or particulates, per se. So for us, it really hasn't. We haven't been able to discern anything specifically. We haven't also done a deep dive in that, specifically looking. Okay, are we seeing some changes in attenuation or something like that? So we really haven't seen anything. What we have seen though is that after microwave observations, the next most utilized data for forecasting was air data, which was aircraft data, and overnight they lost 80% of that. And the Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting even put out a notice saying that with the reduction of this, there is the potential of it to actually have a negative effect on the accuracy of forecasts. So for us, this just kind of highlights, why we need to have that high temporal, high dense observation from space. How about you, Jean?
Yeah, we've noticed that the night turbulence has been really low. The seeing has been really good, and one of our customers actually commended. It was comparing the data between a astronomical observatory, which has very good seeing conditions, and one of our sites, which is in an urban area, and he thought he had the two of them mixed up because the seeing was so good in the urban area that he thought it was actually the observatory. But that's about it. That's what we've noticed. We can't measure particulates and pollution. We measure the atmospheric stability, if you want.
Okay.
So I actually do have a question. So would you attribute maybe some of that stillness to a little bit of a reduction in the heat sinking aspects? Because like you said, you're kind of you're generally mounted, deployed around infrastructure, airports, and those type of places that are known heat sinks. Do you think that might be part of it?
Could very well be. I wish we had more data and we had more comparative data between, but it's yeah, that's a very good question. Unfortunately, it would require a lot of analysis to answer true.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's not a simple answer.
If anybody on the line has some grant funding, I think we both would like to take a look at that.
Okay, any last comment from the panelists before we close? We now time for closing, over time by 1 minute, but if you have any last thoughts that you may want to express before we close, anyone? All good?
Good, thank you.
Always got something to say. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. For
Okay,
sure.
Thank you so much for this. Please note I'm gonna share my screen now. Note the next week's webinar. I'm trying to share my screen. Let's see. There it is. There's a next week we'll have it on Thursday. Next week's webinars on Thursday with ExoTrail, SpaceBid, and Integrasys, all three presenting. I hope you can make it. Thank you everyone for attending, and hope to see you soon. Take care.
All right.
Very much.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.